Hello, good evening. You're watching Awaz News. I'm Kubra Ali. Here are today major updates from across Canada.
York Regional Police is reminding locals to be aware of ongoing telephone scams after some victims reported thousands in losses. In a Monday news release, YRP explained that scammers have been posing as bank investors, telling victims that their debit or credit cards have been compromised. Scammers reportedly asked for card numbers and personal identification numbers PIN for verification. YRP adds that the suspects then tell the victims that someone will be sent to their home to pick up their cards. Once the scammers obtain the victim's card information, they have allegedly been using it to make illegal purchases or withdraw cash from ATMs. Victims have also been reportedly asked to provide a multi-factor authentication code that the suspects are sending to them, which the scammers then use to access their online account and illegally transfer funds. YRP says that these scams have resulted in some victims losing more than $20,000. They shared the following scam protection tips. Never disclose personal information for unsolicited calls from any bank or company. Verify with your bank by contacting them through a phone number that is known to be theirs. Never provide debit or credit cards to anyone who shows up to your home. Always be skeptical and question whether an unsolicited call makes sense or could be a scam. If in doubt, go to your bank and speak with bank staff in person. Victims of fraud are urged to report incidents to the YRP Financial Crime Unit and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday he would impose a 100% tariff on all foreign-made movies, an unprecedented move that threatens to upend Hollywood's global business model. The step signals Trump's willingness to extend protectionist trade policies into cultural industries, raising uncertainty for studios that depend heavily on international box office revenue and cross-border co-productions. Trump announced the measure in a post on his Truth Social platform, claiming U.S. movie making is losing ground to international competition. However, it was not immediately clear that legal authority Trump would impose a 100% tariff on foreign-made films. White House did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for comment on how the tariffs would be implemented. Warner Brothers Discovery, Comcast, Paramount, Skydance, and Netflix also did not immediately respond to the requests. Share of Netflix were down 1.5% in early trading. The president had first floated the idea of a movie tariff in May, but offered very little details, leaving entertainment executives unsure whether it would apply to specific countries or all imports. Studio executives told Reuters earlier this year that they were flummoxed by how a movie tariff might be enforced, given that modern films often use production, financing, post-production, and visual effects spread across multiple countries. The move has drawn skepticism from legal and trade analysts. Some argue films are a form of intellectual property and part of the global trade in services, an area where the U.S. often runs a surplus, raising questions about the legal basis for tariffs. Co-productions with foreign studios have also become more common, adding to doubts about how such films would be classified. U.S. Customs and Border Protection (CBP) is investigating after video surfaced online of what appears to be a border agent telling a driver with Ontario license plates to never come to U.S. again. Video of the incident looks to be filmed by the driver, who said they were traveling on Interstate 90 roughly 5 kilometers from the Lewiston Bridge port of the entry in upstate New York just before 8 a.m. on September 22nd. The short 39-second video, which has since gone viral after it was posted on social media last week, shows the alleged CBP officer following closely behind the filming driver in the left-hand lane of the busy highway. The driver who filmed the video said the following vehicle honked at their Ontario plates before speeding up and switching to the right-hand lane to address them. The driver of the pickup truck, who appears to be wearing a CBP uniform, is heard yelling never to come to the US again before he accelerates again and moves into the left lane without signaling in front of the driver who was filming. It's unclear what transpired before the interaction took place and if the man seen wearing a CBP uniform is in fact employed by the federal agency. Awaz News has reached out to the person who posted the video but has not yet heard back. In a statement, the CBP said it is conducting a managerial review of the incident. The incident comes amid a decline in Canadian tourism to the US this summer against the backdrop of President Donald Trump's trade war. Last week, Statistics Canada said more US residents came to Canada in July than Canadian residents returning from the US. That's only happened one other time in the last 2 decades, excluding travel restrictions brought on by COVID-19. Premier Doug Ford says he is looking to expand the use of surveillance cameras in municipalities across the province to help catch suspects in car thefts and home invasions, but he's providing few details about exactly how such an initiative could work. Ford made the comments at an unrelated transit news conference in Hamilton on Monday morning. Ford said he got the idea after a meeting with Vaughan Mayor Stephen Del Duca over the weekend. The fund Ford was referring is to grant for closed-circuit television camera (CCTV) that allows OPP detachments and local police services to set up CCTV cameras, with the province covering half of the cost to a maximum of $300,000 per year. The Toronto Police Service does deploy CCTV in some public areas, but requires that the footage be overwritten every 72 hours unless deemed of an evidentiary nature. Ford's office did not provide specifics on what cameras would be used or how the program would work. Ford's comments come less than a week after he vowed to remove speed cameras from streets in municipalities across Ontario, labeling them a tax grab. Ford's office did not respond directly to a question about whether the province would consider repurposing speed cameras as part of the program. We are very early in that process, and those conversations will drive the options moving forward. Speaking to reporters on Monday, Ford said residents in his own Etobicoke neighborhood are interested in installing cameras for community safety. Ford said, according to Del Duca, the cameras cost about $15,000 each. The premier added that on Sunday he visited a family that was recently the victim of an armed home invasion. It traumatizes people. I can't even begin to tell you how traumatized people are when they get their house broken in by 4 masked men with a gun pointing it to their heads. You have PTSD, like you can't think. People want to move out of their homes, Ford said. We have to clean up the streets like big time. VR Rail has hit the brakes on non-stop service on some trains traveling between Montreal and Toronto due to operational constraints with CN, according to the Crown Corporation. VR Rail was set to launch a 3-month direct service pilot project on select trains between Montreal and Toronto on September 29, saying it would test demand for faster travel between 2 major centers. As part of the pilot project, VR Rail trains 60, 61, 68, and 69 would not stop in Cornwall, Brockville, Kingston, and Belleville while traveling through Eastern Ontario between Montreal and Toronto. However, VR Rail said Monday non-stop service on 4 trains between Montreal and Toronto will not begin, and trains will continue to stop in Eastern Ontario. VR Rail Canada regrets to announce that the planned pilot project for a direct Montreal-Toronto service scheduled to launch on September 29 has been postponed due to operational constraints with our rail partner CN, a VR Rail spokesperson said in a statement to Awaz News. We remain confident that this downtown-to-downtown service requested by 70% of our passengers represents an important step toward delivering more efficient passenger rail in Canada. A faster and more reliable service would benefit not only VR Rail passengers but also the broader rail network, including our partner CN. VRL said non-stop trains would arrive 30 to 40 minutes earlier at their destination than previously scheduled. Travelers and politicians raised concerns about VRL's plan to introduce non-stop service on 4 trains between Montreal and Toronto, with trains skipping stops in Eastern Ontario. Conservative MP Michelle Barrett called VRL's proposed non-stop service skipping Eastern Ontario unacceptable. Residents in our community, as well as those in other rural regions and along a major corridor in Eastern Ontario, will be underserved, Barrett said in a statement to Awaz News last week. VRL said non-stop service between Montreal and Toronto will continue to be explored for the future. VRL will continue to work closely with CN to explore solutions that would allow us to test and implement this service in the future, VRL said. In the meantime, we sincerely apologize to passengers who were unnecessarily re-accommodated. Impacted customers may modify their booking at no cost by contacting our customer service team. 3 youths are facing charges after they allegedly robbed and ransacked a store in Ajax on Sunday before attempting to flee police in stolen vehicle. Investigators say just before midnight, 3 masked youths entered a Shoppers Drug Mart near Kingston and Westney Roads and began smashing displays with hammers and baseball bats, police say. They left the store with stolen perfume and fled in a stolen vehicle, according to investigators. Police were able to locate the group traveling westbound on Highway 401 minutes later. Their vehicle was stopped and 3 suspects were taken into custody. 2 of 3 suspects were subject to court-imposed conditions in relation to previous robbery charges, police say. The 3 suspects are 15, 16, and 17 years old, respectively, police say. They are facing a combined 17 charges. For a list of the charges they are facing, follow the link. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow is warning that Toronto residents could see a bump in their taxes to account for shelter costs if the federal government doesn't provide more cash for asylum seekers coming to the city. In a news conference ahead of a meeting of her executive committee Monday, Chow said the city's reserve funds are depleted. She added that the city doesn't want to see unhoused people in parks and ravines, so it will raise property taxes at least 2% if it has to do so to get the extra money. A report before the executive committee today says city staff are projecting an unfavorable year-end operating variance of $105.4 million, mainly due to lower than expected funding from the Federal Interim Housing Assistance Program and a federal program that provides funding to municipalities to manage the downstream impact of asylum claimants. In a letter, Chow is asking Council to make a request for the federal government to provide $107 million for the 2025-2026 to support housing costs for refuge claimants and asylum seekers already in the city's emergency shelter system. She said that the city is also facing another funding hurdle for the next year, with the province saying Toronto will get just $7.95 million in 2026 through the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit. The rent supplement program is jointly funded by the provincial and federal governments and helps get people into housing. The less than $8 million figure for next year compares to $19.75 million in 2025 and $38 million in 2024. Chow said the city will have spent its existing funding by October, meaning it will be unable to continue moving people from shelters to housing just as the weather gets cold. She said if the city doesn't get more money from the other levels of government, Toronto residents could see the shortfall made up in the form of higher property taxes in the upcoming city budget. Last month, Chow said she learned Toronto would only receive 26% of its expected cost to shelter refugees and asylum seekers through IHAP. At the time, she said the lower funding amounted to a cut. In a statement to Awaz News last month, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada said it has provided municipalities with $1.5 billion to offset the costs of shelter refugees and asylum claimants since 2017, including nearly $670 million to the City of Toronto.
Thank you for watching Awaz News. I'm Kubra Ali. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same channel. Have a good night.